Okay, Dr. Norgard, I know you have either a plane or a train to catch. I forget which.
Change tags here.
Item number 6, members. Item number 6.
So, push the green one, push the...
Counterintuitive. You press the red one for reasons we cannot understand.
No, I don't get that one.
Okay.
That's the case here. So, first, I'm pleased you adjusted your schedule rules.
Try getting a little closer.
I'm pleased you adjusted your schedule so that I can...
I don't think you've got the mic. Hit the red button and see it again.
See, I thought you said I had no control.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, you have some control.
So,
like the rest of us.
Thank you for putting me on first, even though my colleague Peter Goodwin wanted to go on last. But I'm on an airplane this afternoon. And I'm pleased you got to hear our vice chair at the last meeting. And we are moving towards a form that you may see a triumvirate of chairs at some future date, but I'll mention that a little bit more.
Your vice chair sat through our entire meeting last time and seemed highly amused.
I think he was amused. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Well, we'll just leave it at amused.
Okay.
And I'm reporting on the November 29-30 meeting of the Delta Independent Science Board. The board is in the process of reviewing how well the science programs throughout the Delta, however they're connected to the Delta, what position they're in to be effective looking at ecological restoration, adaptive management in the light of uncertainties such as climate change, invasive species. And this was the decision to review programs as scientific questions rather than programs as agencies. I have to say that had we followed Hank Nordhoff a little more thoroughly earlier on, we would not have scheduled a boat trip at the end of November, but we had a field trip planned in which we were thanks, Hank.
What happened to intrepid biological scientists tromping through the wilderness in the middle of rain, sleet, snow, hail, and other inclement weather?
I did not hear any board member saying, I'm not going to go. We were told by more responsible people that perhaps it would be a bad idea. As it turned out, the weather was not as bad as predicted that day, but it could have been. And so we ended up taking a virtual tour, and I have to say that it was unusually successful. We had the same speakers we would have had on the boat. We were not subject to wind and rain. We were not down at water level trying to peer over levees or scramble up levees. We were able to use Google Maps and look at the sites on one screen with a Google map, being able to go in and out and look around, which is hard to do from a boat. And then we also had pictures usually taken on beautiful days of what we were supposed to be looking at. And that, the beautiful day part was a little unreal, but it was a very good and successful meeting. We went from Sassoon Marsh up into the Cashlou area, Liberty Island, Yolo Bypass area, all on a virtual tour. The board was impressed that some agencies and some scientists in those agencies are very aware of all the contingencies they should be thinking about in terms of adaptive management, but this was by no means universally true, and so we were concerned, but we acquired a lot of information on sort of the variability of the preparedness to really be thinking about adaptive management. At the same time, the board itself learned that, or at least it was brought very much to our attention, that the effectiveness of one restoration site is going to depend on other restoration sites and how those are managed when they're brought online, how big they are, and that the interdependency and the temporal interdependency in the restoration process is significant, or we expect it to be significant. And this then plays to the problem or the issues of how do you have performance measures for your restoration site independent of other restoration sites. As those come on, your site may perform better, your site may perform worse. How do you adapt your management? But the whole issues of performance measures and responsibility and decision making in a system-wide context was impressed upon the board, and that was very effective. We also had a very good sense after the talk that while the individual sites and their management are interested in adaptive management, a lot of the gains of adaptive management will be across the sites, that they will be each doing different things, and there's a great opportunity to learn across the sites. At the same time, the sites will be managed by multiple parties, different agencies overlapping, but not so much that everybody will automatically learn from each other. And so there's going to be a tremendous public benefit from the process of restoration taking place, or to be gained. It won't take place unless the different restoration parties actually have time to get together and share what they're learning, actually say, if you do this and I do that, then we can get the benefits together. But several of the parties are operating quite independently, very aware that they're operating quite independently and frustrated by it, but there is no budget for them to sort of operate in a way that is really beneficial for everybody. I think we also...
Mr. Fiorini has a question?
Yeah.
That brings up a question.
Yeah.
You just made an observation that
the board learns.
Well, offer for us some suggestions about how to better integrate the activities of different agencies.
Well, I think on the science plan we should be thinking about this as to how to get that coordination there, but there's also how to stimulate the individual parties to become involved in that coordination. And there is overlap in that similar consultants are used on multiple sites. There's overlap in that Fish and Game is involved in multiple sites, but maybe different people. But there's still a case where Solano Land Trust operating with great capacity in their own scientific capability, but not actually having the funding to be as participatory as they would like to be in the larger process. And how do you get that? I mean, I'm using Solano as a case where they're not reporting to the state, but what they are doing is very much in the interest of the state and interactive with the state's interest, the BDC, the Delta interest overall. That was certainly the one that brought us the problem to our attention. We also were at least brought to our attention that water management itself is part of the restoration process, that we shouldn't be thinking of restoration as a site being transformed into a saltwater marsh here and a freshwater marsh there, that how we manage the water, and particularly in the Yellow Bypass, had great influence on restoration in that area and further downstream as well. And so it's a combination of water management and land management that we're looking at. And we had a good sense of that through this session of the meeting. We also spoke with the federal agencies involved with restoration, and we'll be doing more of that at our January meeting. We were impressed with the Corps of Engineers presentation where, how do you think about adaptive management when you are making decisions on the release from from Folsom Dam, when you're making decisions on levees, when you're involved to some extent in restoration, when you've got dredge spoils that need to go places, when you got your fingers in the delta in so many different ways, and yet you're one agency. But there you can say, well, great, now you got an agency with a finger in the delta in lots of different ways. There's a coordinating body, and yet, well, I think Phil has that question.
If you're going to talk with the federal officials on water management issues at your next meeting, it would be enormously beneficial for us if the science board has any observations or recommendations to make on how to integrate water management with ecosystem restoration, consistent with the state law, but also consistent with the federal statute, which directs the federal government to generally apply what we call the co-equal goals, how that operationally can be done. And I agree with you. It's awfully hard to imagine an operator of Shasta going through a 16-month peer review process before making a decision of what tomorrow's release will be.
Yeah.
But surely there must be illustrations, examples, ideas that you could provide to us that would be helpful. I'd sure like to hear them.
We are looking for those, as well as the drafters of the science plan are looking for these as well.
Right.
I think we will be inventing it as we go, because we do have a system that's extremely interesting here. But yeah, the whole idea of adaptive management on different timescales for different types of decisions, and just where do we draw the line and say we have enough information to make this decision, but then we need to review in a longer process as to what the sort of the operating criteria are, which are different than the day-to-day decisions.
Dr. Goodwin?
So I was going to make a general, perhaps, comment afterwards when Dr. Norgaard's finished.
Okay, well, that would be a quick review of much of the meeting. We also reviewed the draft charge that the Delta Stewardship Council has presented to the Delta Independent Science Board.
And members, that's in your packet, attachment 1 to this file.
Right, so that's attachment 1. The Delta Independent Science Board discussed it, not at much length as I had hoped. I remained concerned about we're an independent science board. Who would we take a charge? But that, and then also that we'd be overlapping with the role of the Delta, with the Department of Fish and Game, soon to be Department of Fish and Wildlife's responsibilities. My board members were a little less concerned about the issues and say, well, this is a charge, and it in some ways constrains us as well as tells us what we need to do. And the pros and cons were weighed back and forth, and we said, well, we'll do what we can with this charge, and then I'll try to do it in a way that doesn't look like we're trying to one-up the department that is responsible for making these decisions. So we accept the charge, and hesitantly on my own part, but the board is ready to go ahead and say, fine, that's a charge, we'll do what we can.
Questions on this issue? Any questions, Don? No? Okay.